discerning, it is because of the impurities of the mind. Because the
So
mind,
if you're stuck in discernment, are you still in ignorance?
definitely. So I'm not able to discern. It means the mind is dictating the intellect. It says this is right, this is right. It does not want to discern. You do not contemplate. You see, that is why I intuitively felt that I should switch on to that 40 steps and I should directly come to another text which whose title is Hammer the Delusion and Find the Unconditional Love. So we will give a break to that 40 steps and we will just focus on how to hammer the delusion. Hammer the delusion means that I am discerning at a very subtler level to remove the delusion. So you don't fail to discern. And I was thinking a lot during the last 5 or 6 weeks sessions, and I said, no, I should not go mechanically. I should follow what is the pragmatic approach is. So you see the intellect, understand the intellect as a free will. Or you can say intellect and free will are the same. Intellect is knowledge, intellect is free will. And mind is impulsive, mind is instinctive, mind is habitual. See, I see you, mind. I see you are Nick, that is intellect. There is a very thin line between the intellect and the mind. I see something beautiful. I appreciate that beauty. And then I get attached to that beauty. Still, it is a mind. I get obsessed with that beauty. It is still the mind. And now the intellect comes. Intellect says, what the heck, Nick, you are doing? Why you get obsessed and why you are attached? And now you follow this thought process. So intellect says, why you are attached, why you get obsessed with it? It has nothing to do with you, and your mind becomes free. Your discernment is complete. But now you see, understand it clearly. This text is such a great text. It explores the dark areas of our individual self. So I thought better to take it. So we should understand. So now the mind is attached and obsessed. So intellect says, what the heck you are doing? Mind says, I am attached, I like it. I am obsessed with it. Intellect says, nothing doing. Mind says, you reach home. You are in the kitchen and preparing a cup of coffee. And the mind has an imagined pleasure because of that attachment and obsession. Now you lack discernment. Intellect always has to do the discernment. Now what happens? So you sit in your living room and you are taking a sip of coffee. And the mind continues to remain attached and obsessed. It has lot of thoughts about that event. And now because it has lot of thoughts, intellect submits. You lack discernment. And now your mind has taken over the intellect. Intellect is paralyzed. And now when the intellect is paralyzed, intellect starts singing the tune of the mind. So even now, intellect, which has the capacity to discern, which has a free will, It has lost the free will because of the mind, because of the attachment, because of the obsession. And now that is what you are talking about. So I clearly painted a picture when you told me sometime I lose the power of this. Do you see
well,
that?
sometimes I get stuck in discerning something. Like it's taking longer than I want. I get stuck in a habitual thought pattern.
Yeah, that is what. You are right. Mind has an habitual thought pattern. It repeats itself. A repetition means somewhere the mind has a strong likes. Mind has a strong attachment. So sometime we are stuck. So that sometime is a moment when the intellect is paralyzed. Stuck means the intellect is paralyzed. Intellect is paralyzed means what? It means it is listening to its instinctive, impulsive, habitual mind. It is not able to discern, to see what is right and wrong. Yes, you are right. So now what happens? There is one more very serious changes takes place in the mind. Because the mind is attached, because the mind is obsessed, so it says, it doesn't use the word attachment. It says, I love this person. But that love is attachment. It doesn't say that I'm not attached. No, I love that person. I love. Because it is a habitual repetition of a thought, feeling, and emotion towards someone. It is conditional love. When the mind says I love, it is conditional love, and conditional love is attachment. That is what we have to understand. And at every point of our life, in every journey, in all relationship, we have to understand this conditional love. That is from where the word is coined, unconditional love. Gradually we will also understand. So the Masters has given two titles of this book. One title is Hammer the Delusion. So when I hammer the delusion, I have to discern. I have to use the intellect and the free will. And the second title is known as the Bhaj Govinda. Enter into the unconditional love. What the heck? This master uses both intellect and the unconditional knowledge and the unconditional love at the same time? Yes. When you have a right knowledge, we have a right knowledge of the real self, that real self is of the nature of the love, minus attachment, minus conditional love, minus delusion, minus habitual thought process. So knowledge comes from one side, love is already there. Love is recognized from the other side. Here is at the meeting point is the real self. So one person tries to move through the attachment to the detachment to the unconditional love. One person goes through the delusion, discernment, and ultimately dispassion. They reach to the same state. So when the Jesus says love is God, he is right. When our master says there is only one supreme consciousness at all, they are also right. So how to relate that pure supreme consciousness with the love? It is the same. From the point of view of reasoning and intellect, it is pure consciousness. From the point of view of pure emotion, It is unconditional love. So the false knowledge, ultimately the false is causing the bondage and the suffering. What is false? It's a repetitive, impulsive thought process, feeling, and emotions that takes over the intellect, and then I am stuck in discerning is what the impure mind is. To simplify, anytime you are stuck with something, ask yourself where you are stuck. I am stuck with this beautiful girl. What is that stuck? So the girl is beautiful, very good. Now, where you are stuck, that mind has projected something more with the beautiful girl. So perception with projection is the meaning of getting stuck. Perception without projection means that you are already free. Intellect is not paralyzed. Intellect says, yes, I perceive this girl, I appreciate, beautiful, very good. Finished. There is no projection. You are young, so that's why I give only examples of beautiful girls. There are many examples. It may be the house, it may be the car, it may be a situation, it may be anything. So where we have reached to a little deeper understanding of this mind by default perceives and projects. If the intellect is not alive, not working in that situation, mind will not only perceive, but it will project. It will project imagine pleasure. It will project imagine pain. You told me before also that while I was taking my dog to a walk and I was totally scared, I did not talk at that moment. I said, let me wait. Let your mind have certain maturity. Now you will trust and understand. Oh, it is only the imagined reality my mind has created. Imagined fear, imagined pleasure, imagined reaction, imagined anger. So we have to hammer the delusion. This is what causes the delusion. And at the same time, we have to discover that unconditional love. Mind and the intellect plays a crucial role. The mind is impulsive, habitual, instinctive, feels and has sensations. Mind is impure. Mind has perception with projection. You have understood projection, or I can say mind with imagine pleasure, imagine pain. Intellect examines, reasons. It wants to know the cause and effect before taking any action. Why? Because it wants to have a right knowledge. That girl is beautiful. I am attached to it. Intellect says why you are attached. Let us find the cause and the reason. Are you attached because she is beautiful, or are you attached because you have some expectations? Mind says I love her. Intellect says what do you mean by love? Is it a conditional love? Yes, because I am attached, because I like her, so I love her. Can you love a person you hate? Answer is no. So intellect is reasoning. Intellect is now discerning. Can you love a person you hate or dislike? No, how can I love a person whom I hate? Oh, so this is a matter of attachment and detachment. It has nothing to do with the love. Do you see? It has nothing to do with the love. Oh, now the intellect is shining. Intellect is not taken over or not dictated by the mind. That is what is known as the self-awareness. That is the quality of a seeker. And the intellect continues. So, did you understand mind? You are talking of attachment and detachment, which you claim as love and the hate. Then intellect says, are you expecting something from that? Girl, yes, I am expecting. It is hidden behind. In my mind, it may be a sensuality. But why so you are seeking a physical pleasure. So that is why you claim that love. Physical pleasure is not equivalent to love. Intellect is discerning again and again. And intellect is still free. It is not taken over and dictated by the mind yet. Now your mind calms down and mind says, yes, I agree with you. It is attachment or detachment. Otherwise, how can I have an unconditional love to a person I hate or to a person I like? So my love is based on my likes and dislikes. My love is based on my expectations. My love is based on my preferences. So intellect is putting this analysis into the mind. And your mind listens to it. It instantly becomes calm and relaxed. Now you release the projection from your perception. How it happens? By understanding, by knowledge. You have hammered the delusion. And when you hammer the delusion, you have to continue further. That there is an unconditional love. Only in a right knowledge the unconditional love blossoms. If you don't have a right knowledge, the love cannot blossom. I should have a right knowledge. Mother has an unconditional love because she knows he is my boy, he is my child. That is one way to say it. So what happens, what I said, only with the right knowledge to be understood in the intellect, it moves into the mind, then only the unconditional love blossoms. You can only enter into the unconditional love only when there is a right knowledge. Why? Right knowledge leads to the right perception. And the right perception results into awakening to that love. So the unconditional love always goes with the wisdom. Wisdom is applied knowledge. So this master has given the two titles, Bhaj Govindam, enter into an unconditional love all the time, and hammer the delusion. We have to know it. We have to practice it to remove the delusion. We have to live in it. The moment you start living in it, you will recognize the real love. What is that love? You will recognize the love to the real self. You love to the real self inside. So all are real self. So you always have an unconditional love. Do you see that? That is what happened to Jesus when he saw the love is God. He saw it inside. And the same thing he saw in every being. There was no projection. There was no imagined pleasure or pain. There was no preference of likes and dislikes. So who understood that likes and dislikes? His intellect. And his intellect dominated over the mind. Dominated over the mind means it purified the mind. Simply, you purify the mind instantly by the knowledge. So, love is God. And then he made another statement, love, what he said, love thy neighbors as you love thyself. You see, that is an extension. So he removed the delusion first, then he recognized that there is something, some pure emotion is flowing towards everyone. Why it is flowing towards everyone? It is in the mood of giving. What is this mode of giving? Unconditional love only manifests when the mind is in the mode of giving, not taking, not grabbing, not expecting, not attaching. So we have to understand through the intellect, we should have a right knowledge. And with that right knowledge, you keep the mind staying in that right knowledge. You need not to worry. There will be an unconditional love that starts blossoming from your heart. So normally we simply talk, I have an unconditional love for you and I have a hate for you. That does not mean anything.
That's not unconditional.
It is, yeah. It is not unconditional. When unconditional means it flows towards everyone. It flows towards everyone. When you restrict your mind to flow with a hatred to one, to attachment to the other, it cannot be an unconditional love. It means your intellect is sleeping. You did not analyze it clearly. You did not put the mind into the right perspective. And the mind is still have some imagined pain and pleasure. So we are stuck in discerning. When you're stuck in discerning, why? Because you are attached, because you are deluded, because you have certain level of anxiety, because you have reaction, because you have strong likes and dislikes, because your mind is constantly blaming someone, reacting to someone. So that is the way Eastern wisdom guides us towards the self-discovery, because these mind and the mind with its delusion and attachment and impurity is preventing it to realize the real self. I have to purify the mind. I have to remove the delusion. Because since our birth, mind was unconscious. We didn't know anything. Nobody taught me that your real self and the false I are different. Nobody taught us. So when we started learning the Eastern wisdom, we realized there is a false I which causes all the trouble, and then there is a real I. now it is too late. Mind is already full of lot of impurities in the mind. So what happens? It appears, for the mind, it appears as if you are searching a needle in a desert. And that needle is the real self. Fact is opposite. The real self is everywhere. It is because of the ignorance and the delusion I find it is very difficult to find. Go back to what Jesus says. What he says, an elephant or camel can pass through the needle if you have a faith. It's a symbolism.
What does that mean?
It simply means that a needle, an elephant or a camel, something like that. Needle can pass through the needle if you know it. If you know it means the real self is all everywhere. You have covered it with your attachment. You have covered it with your conditional love. You have covered it with the delusion. So that is why you find it impossible. But the moment you recognize there is a heap of delusion is surrounded by your mind. By the knowledge, you can remove that heap of the delusion completely. That is the meaning. So they have to write in a metaphorically, otherwise, because there is no other language, you can express it. So every master has to write symbolically, metaphors. It is nearest to the near. The master says the real self is nearest to the near. It is farthest to the further. Farthest to the further. I am already engaged in delusion, ignorance, impurity of the mind. Then it is too far from me. And it is nearest even to the nearest thought that I have. It is nearest to the feeling, the innermost feeling. It is my essence. How can you say? The sweetness of the sugar is nearest to the candy. How can you say? It is the very essence of the candy. If the sweetness is not there, so the real self is the essence. So what Eastern wisdom does through your intellect, by understanding and contemplation and reflection, think of that Eastern wisdom is like a compass. That compass, you take any compass, big, small, high, costly, big, the compass always points towards the north. So all our principles, teachings, practices always points to that real self. It doesn't forget. You have many approaches. Compass always points to the north. It cannot do otherwise. So knowledge of the Eastern wisdom always points us to the real self. That we need to understand. So to know it is good, but to practice it is better, and to live in it is the best. To live in it, and then to be it is known as the awakening. So intellect has a free will, no doubt. No doubt. But when it is dictated by the mind, it loses its free will. It loses its freedom of thinking, freedom of contemplation. That is the meaning you are stuck. So that is why we say the impurity of the mind has to be removed, so that the intellect can work freely, can discern easily, can reach to the unbiased knowledge. It has an unbiased approach. Sanskrit word, you listen to it. Chinta, chintan. Beautiful word. Chinta. Chinta literally means worries, anxiety, duality, conflict, delusion. Chintan means contemplation and reflection. So in both worries and contemplation and reflection, we think. In one process, we contemplate and reflect, we get rid of the worries, anxiety, attachment, projection. And in the worries, we increase it. And we don't recognize what I'm doing. I don't recognize my projection. I don't recognize my delusion. And that results into fear, anxiety, reaction, conflict, and impure states of the mind. Are you getting it?
Mm-hmm.
It is within us. The kingdom of God is within us. But that kingdom of the God cannot be perceived when the mind is impure. It doesn't see it. Simply it is covered, it is veiled. So our focus should be purely on hammer the delusion and look at it. Where is the unconditional love? That flame of the unconditional love is burning inside. I have to pick it up. In the impure states of the mind, that unconditional love hides. It becomes an attachment. It becomes a craving. It becomes an obsession. And that obsession, that attachment, we claim it is an unconditional. I loved you unconditionally. No, you were crazy unconditionally. So that is why only the intellect is the instrument which can recognize which is the false I created by the mind, causes the suffering, and it is the same intellect can recognize the real self. In other way, we say the entire objective reality, you cannot find the real self. Only it is a subjective reality. So your mind has to be pure, clean, and the intellect should be ready to contemplate and reflect. Then only we can find out let me easily define and discern with that definition 24/7 to drop the delusion, attachment, projection. So there are two I's living in us. One I is the individual self. Other is the real I. Can I put into a mathematical formula? Answer is yes. So your individual soul, sometimes we say, even in Christianity, we say it is the individual soul that commits sins. So where I use the word individual self. So I'm giving you a mathematical formula. Individual self is equal to body, breath, mind, intellect, ego, plus their actions, plus pain, pleasure, duality, conflict, attachment, detachment, plus real self. In simply to put, Individual self is equal to outer cover, the personality. We say persona, the mask. What is the mask? Mask is a body-mind complex. The same formula can be said that individual self is equal to body-mind complex plus real self. So what will be the real self? Then the real self is equal to individual self minus body and mind complex. What is left is the pure consciousness. What is that pure consciousness? It is the real self of the nature of peace, happiness, love, truth, and wisdom. Are you getting it? Pure mathematical formula. The real self is equal to individual self minus body-mind complex, or minus body, breath, mind, intellect, and ego, plus their actions, plus pain and pleasure, plus attachment and detachment, plus delusion. So individual self always depends on the real self. The real self is always independent.
But there can't be an individual self and a real self.
Yes, at present, when I say Nick, with the body-mind complex, with the thought, feeling, and emotions, it is the individual self. And
but that's not my real self, though.
Yes, but then what I said, individual self is equal to body-mind complex plus real self. So the very essence is hidden inside.
But there really only is one, though, real self.
Yeah, real self is always one. I know what doubts are coming. Go ahead. Ask a question.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm thinking if there is, like I appear as a body, mind, and self, but I'm actually just the real self. I'm not what I appear to be.
Yes, and that what you appear to be is the individual self.
And yes, I appear to be the individual self.
And what is behind that appearance and apparent reality is the real self.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So the real self does not suffer, the individual self always suffers. I'm going further.
Of course.
So
the individual self is where I fall into ignorance.
Yes. When you said you are stuck in discerning, it is the individual self.
Is one supposed to know when they're acting as the real self? Like when they're...
You wake up in the morning and you do all your actions in peace. Before the action, during the action, and after the action, there is always a peace. And that peace is an attribute of the real self. You have already recognized.
Correct.
You are in unconditional love before, during, and after. You recognize the real self. Throughout the day, you are able to maintain that state of the calmness. You did all your personal, professional, social, family work and the duties and actions. But behind, it is supported by that state of the calmness and the wisdom. It is the real self. Why don't you recognize? You can recognize. It is always there. Why? Because the real self is independent of the individual self, but individual self cannot be independent of the real self. It depends on the real self.
That makes sense. That's like what we've talked about. It's like the wave that depends on the water, but the water doesn't depend on the wave.
Yes. And the waves continue to merge, appear and disappear, but the water is not. The essence remains the same.
But really, if you were to take that even further, there really isn't even a wave, Girish. It's all just water.
It is, yes. In the beginning, we discern wave is different from the water, but when we use to get absorbed. So what will happen? Now you are at a higher level of a seeker. You return home and your mind says, no, let me absorb into meditation. You sit for 2 to 3 hours without any movement. At that level, you see the wave is water. At present, I see it intellectually. So there, now the mind is totally aspiring for that real self. No, I don't need anything, I don't want to watch the TV. What is happening? No, you break up all the habits, instinctive and impulses. You just sit down. I used to sit for 3 hours. And I said, what is happening to me? Am I becoming insane? And then I realized my mind is now more attracted to the real self than attracted to the things outside. So at that moment, then we say, then we can claim, then we can declare the wave itself is also the water. There is a higher level of realization.
Why do you use the words real self? Is that from the Upanishads, or is that just something you came up with?
No, real self is the name. It is referred in 1 or 2 Upanishads. And then, because if I use the word soul, it creates a lot of confusion.
In God, the same thing would create confusion?
Yeah, but the real self helps me. Then if people start asking what is the false self, and I say here is the false self and here is the real self. So it inspires people to understand it clearly.
I see.
So that is where I coined this word. Many people other have coined this word. So end suffering, we must recognize our essential nature, that is the real self. So by realizing the real self, we become free from the delusion. We also recognize there is an unconditional love that is flowing from within us. See that? So instead of seeking our essential nature, the impure mind is constantly seeking the pleasure from outside. That is why we have to purify the mind. And the impure mind is a part of the individual self, or you can say the false self. The individual self is basically the false self. It is the way. It is the apparent reality. It is constantly changing. It is constantly changing. The time comes. This body has 6 stations. I will talk in detail one time. At the 6th station is the death of the body. You do whatever you want to do. You cannot prevent this body to reach to the 6th station. You can delay it. You can postpone it.
Yeah.
So we don't want to recognize it. We say this body is real I. But it is an apparent reality. So I continue to live in ignorance. I have to remove this delusion. I have to hammer this delusion by knowledge. How by knowledge? By the intellect. How by the intellect? By discernment and dispassion.
Does it take my body to know the real self?
Can you repeat it?
Does it take my body to know the real self?
Body is not conscious. Body is matter. It is like a mouse.
I guess my question is, did I know I didn't know the real self before I was born.
Yes.
So didn't it take...
You did not know the real self before I was born. You know the real self before you were in the womb of the mother and before you were born. Both are true. When I live in ignorance, I don't know. Even living in ignorance, the real self still exists there.
True. Of course. It's always there.
It is always there. So I simply did not know it. So I have to know it. How I have to know it? Applying the principles of Eastern wisdom, I have to know it. How? By removing the delusion. By removing the attachment. So those who are seeker, those who understands it, it's already there, it's always there. It means if it is always there, I didn't know it. Why I didn't know it? It is because of the ignorance, and it is because of the delusion. So let me hammer the delusion and find the real self. This text has only, it is like an Upanishad. This text has only 31 verses. Verses, couplet. Verses means the couplet in Sanskrit. Every couplet, mostly they are two-liners. Two-liner has 4 parts. Every part is like a zip file. We have to open that file. We have to open that folder into a file to understand the entire journey. I am just explaining today the title. One title is the Bhasgurindam, unconditional love. And second title is Hammer the Delusion. How many times I seek a sense of pleasure, comfort, a sense of security when I wake up in the world, when I wake up in the morning and I live my life throughout the day, and I'm absorbed in different kinds of a pleasure, of eating, of some sensation, of attachment, etc., etc. I'm in delusion. Because my mind is constantly seeking happiness in the external world, such as relationship, objects, wealth, situation. I'm already in a delusion in a very cool way. It is not that I'm in a delusion whenever I have a stress, when I'm into anxiety. I'm moving forward. Whatever I demand, it comes to me. Whatever I demand from the world outside, why I demand? I demand only for the sake of pleasure. Should I leave it? No, nothing to be left. I'm not saying to do anything outside. You have to do it inside. You have to recognize, you have to remove the delusion inside. Delusion is there, always there. Recognizing, you recognize the consequences of delusion. That is why you have to hammer. But if you don't recognize the consequences of this delusion, you will never hammer it.
If I have a delusional thought, but I discern it immediately, is that delusion?
No, when you discern it and that delusion thought dissolves completely, your mind even doesn't want to remember it. You are a seeker. You are a great seeker. You have already achieved. You move to the next level. The way you are driving on the highway and you see the highway is running behind you, you don't get affected. You don't get affected. It is not running behind you. You know it's a delusion. So when you know the delusion has no impact on you and your life. But delusion may continue to exist. Like when you are driving the car on front, the highway is running, the trees are running behind you. But fact is that it is not running.
Yeah.
So you know by certainty, it's not running. Yeah, thank you, mind. I know what the heck you are doing. Mind, why you are attached to this beautiful girl? Why? What happened to you? How many times you were attached to different people, things, and girls? What happened to you? The intellect is a reminder. You have started discerning. And now the same mind now starts going down and it moves into the state of calmness. Why? Because that projection is delusional. Projection does not exist. Only the perception exists. And that helps you. So, thoughts and emotions associated with delusion creates desire. I'm moving further. Thoughts and emotions associated with delusion creates desire. and desire leading to the repeated thoughts of seeking happiness from the external sources, and then we are caught in the vicious circle of the desire and the delusion. It drains us, it exhausts us, because inability to fulfill these desires leads to hesitation, pride, jealousy, and other impurities of the mind. But why it drains me? I'm seeking a pleasure because pleasure is not there. You are searching where we are searching something which does not have a property. Happiness, peace are not the property of any situation, person, event, thing in the world outside. And you are searching peace. So you have superimposed. So one set of energy is already used in imposing, in projecting, and other set of energy and effort is trying to procure and secure that happiness. So you are draining yourself. You are wasting your effort. And that comes in the state of a delusion. When that comes in the state of a delusion, and when it is repeated, it becomes the habit, it becomes your personality, and that personality is the individual self. It is the false self. So unless the intellect contemplates and reflects, I mean unless the intellect discerns to understand the futility of seeking happiness externally, nothing will change. I have to understand the futility, but it does not mean the wealth is just a futile. No, wealth keeps my physical survival intact. I told you I have to change my mind. I have not to change the hands of the wealth. So majority of the people feel that, oh, should I leave the money? Should I leave the house? No. Don't do anything outside. Look inside, from where it is originating. The delusion is living in the mind. You have to get rid of that delusion. You have to get rid of that delusion. So when people try to remove those situations, I have lot of problem with you, that is why I'm divorced. So why you got married? So in the first state you were in delusion. In the second stage also you are in delusion. You are still living in delusion. You don't want to understand. Because you are divorced, you are divorcing because you want to remarry. One guy recently from nearby state contacted me. He had last year. He contacted me, he paid me. I charged almost double and triple than yours. And then, that money was lying, and I was thinking, should I return the money? So he told me that he divorced, and now he had a girlfriend, and the girlfriend has lot of problem. I have to solve her problem, and then I will email you to have a session. I said, very good. 6 months, 7 months, 8 months have passed. So you divorce in order to enter into another problem to solve. I did not say anything to him. And then he left me. He said, no, I'm not getting what you are giving to me. I'm searching for peace and happiness and lot of vibrations in the body. I said, better, I don't want to get into delusion. You find someone else. and he is extra intelligent. He is a highly successful businessman. What I want to convey, even the highly intelligent people can be deluded. To remove the delusion, you need a common sense. By having a very higher IQ, it does not mean that you have removed your delusion. Because IQ does not change your perspective. Common sense changes your perspective. Perspective, perception. Perception without projection. So I have seen lots of people, highly intellectual, genius. So to become a seeker, by constant, consistent listening and learning, that is what the benefit comes. Then you recognize what is common sense. I have to discern. I stuck with the discernment. Yes, that's a great attitude. Yes, I recognize that I was stuck. So when you second time you do, you will also recognize where you got stuck. And the simple answer in delusion. From where the delusion comes. Delusion means what appears true is not true. So who perceives it? It is the mind. So the mind perceives impulsively, habitually, instinctively, with attachment, with obsession and craving, seeking the pleasure from the world outside. And that helps me to rise in awareness, rise in self-awareness. Now intellect is ready to get rid of this delusion. And by discerning, it also recognizes this is an attachment, this causes the dependence. This is detachment, this also causes the dependence. And when there is any dependence, how can there be an unconditional love? I recognize it. When you recognize it is a conditional love, you are ready to drop it. When you are ready to drop it, it means you are resetting your entire life. Reset button. Yesterday you were reacting to your parents, and today you discern it and you are calm and relaxed. Your parents continue to react. Let them. They did not apply the discernment. Removing the delusion can result into instant calmness and poise in your personality, in your attitude. That is required for the life of a seeker. If you don't go into that, it will cause problem. So the two things simultaneously we go for it. We awaken to the unconditional love. Last point, very important. My mind prompted me to say that. Never ever think that you create an unconditional love or you create a wisdom. By contemplation, reflection, by applying these principles, you enter into unconditional love. You enter into wisdom. You don't create anything. If unconditional love and the wisdom is created, then anyone can create and go with hand in hand. It is the very existence of the entire cosmos. That is why Jesus said love is God. That is why God means all pervading. How can you create, when you are limited as an individual self, can you create unconditional love and wisdom? Are you kidding? Not possible. So it means my mind, when the mind becomes pure, soft and humble, the intellect pushes it with the wisdom by discernment. You remove the delusion, and once you remove the delusion, your mind awakens to that unconditional love. So you enter into the unconditional love, you enter into the wisdom.
That's beautiful.
So we'll start understanding this text, which will
Yeah.
help you